Welcome to The Point with Mick Rich. Lots happening. Every week's a lot happening. Today I want to talk about the criminal justice elites. And you may be asking about what that looks like, who these people are. You know them, you read about them, but it's hard to put it into perspective when we talk about elites. And what I'm talking about is that select group of people, individuals, that want a clear conscience while they protect their lifestyle at the expense of others. These are the ones that live in the gated communities. They hire private security firms to guard their homes, their family, their businesses. They have their children attending non-public schools, and they don't mingle with the common folks. And those individuals it's just amazing. You read about them in Hollywood. That's when we think about it, but they're right here in our community. And these are the ones that are shaping the criminal justice system here in our city and our state. And we all pay a price for that. Because why? Because they live protected lives and they put violent criminals in our neighborhoods. And this is going on, and we see it over and over. 5 years ago, the Democratic-controlled New Mexico legislature passed the New Mexico Denial of Bail Measure, also known as Constitutional Amendment Number 1. This was back in 2016. It was sold to the voters as a measure that would humanize the criminal justice system, to make it fair for all New Mexicans, regardless of their ability to pay for bail while waiting trial. Those criminal justice elites sold it to New Mexicans as a fair and equitable system. And who doesn't want a fair and equitable system? I do, you do, we all do. That's what we're about. That's one of the great things about being American. So we care about people. We want it fair and equitable. But 4 years later, what do we ended up with? And that's what I'm going to talk about. Simply, New Mexico is more dangerous with more violent criminals on the streets. Albuquerque's violent crime rose again in 2020, and the Journal headlines while the crime rates dropped. What they don't share, and what I'm here, and this is why I'm on the program, because you get it straight from me, is that they have changed what constitutes a crime. If it's under $1,000, they don't report it. And if you remember, it was last year, a gentleman had a bicycle getting on the bus, and he got in a fight because somebody was stealing him, and they shot and killed him. The theft of the bike would not have been registered as a crime. But a man died over that bicycle. This is what we're talking about. And I love it. The politicians say, this is what makes politicians, they go, oh my gosh, crime is dropping, but it sure doesn't feel that way. It's a mess. And a good example of what's wrong. Oh, and I want to share with you that I reached out to Albuquerque Police Department, no response about joining me on the program. I reached out to the Bernalillo District Attorney's Office, see if they wanted to come out and talk. No. I reached out to the Albuquerque Police Association. They don't want to come either. I reached out to the State Attorney General's office. They're not interested in coming. But you know who is interested, who cares about keeping violent criminals off our street? Is Gerald Madrid, of Gerald Madrid Bail Bonds. And he said, I'm willing to take the hot seat. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with him. A good example of what's happening is a guy named Darren Basher. In the week of what happened, the week of May 4th, 2019, the night UNM lost a good baseball player, and we all lost a good man. And when we say lost, you think, oh, did he end up out in the wilderness? No, he was shot and killed on the streets of Albuquerque. But that tragedy starts back in September of 2018. Basher was charged with shooting a man in the stomach and was almost immediately back out on the streets. In February 2019, Basher was charged with shooting from a motor vehicle, and he was right back out on the street. And then in May of 2019, Basher was charged with murdering Jackson Weller. I got to see, and like it was a privilege, it wasn't, but I went and saw it, and it was horrific to watch. The security cam. And that shooter was calm, cool, and collected when he shot Jackson Weller. The shooter had planned out the shooting, engaged Jackson in a verbal exchange to get close. Then he ended the exchange, slowly turned around like he's going to walk away, but instead he reached behind him, pulled out a pistol, sidearm, and shot Jackson Weller point blank in the chest, then calmly walked away. Jackson didn't even realize what happened. His buddies didn't realize what happened. And the shooter just slowly walked away. When I saw that video, the first thing that came to my mind was, this isn't the first time he shot somebody, and most likely not the first time he murdered someone. Here's what amazed me was Eddie Aragon and I went on air just 2 hours later on Rocket Talk, and we're going back and forth talking about it is, APD, the city of Albuquerque, did not even publish what the shooter looked like. It wasn't until Eddie and I went on air that we finally forced APD in the city of Albuquerque to put out notice of who they were looking for and what he looked like. Here recently, when I looked at the articles, and when we talk about fairness and equity in the criminal justice system, do you know that they never mentioned who the other two victims were? Only Jackson Weller. This is, when we talk about fair and equity, this is not fair and equity for the victims. Bottom line is that our elected officials are letting us down, our appointed officials are letting us down. Getting violent criminals off our streets is not a priority for the legislature or our governor. What are they enacting? Abortion up to the point of delivery. That's a priority for them. Not protecting you and I. This is unconscionable to me. So, I sit down and I sit down and I say, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? Because we're going to do something about it. Our criminal justice system have failed the good people in New Mexico, and our elected officials are skewing the crime stats and telling us crime is getting better, but it sure doesn't feel that way. So that's the idea. You have skewed stats and you push that out, and then you acknowledge the feeling of the people. That's those two things that they tell people. It's not just me saying this. When you read the newspaper, you watch the politicians, they tell that. Acknowledge the stats, acknowledge the feelings, and then tamp down the feelings. Tell you what, we should be outraged. I'm outraged. This is why I have to the point with Mick Rich. So Albuquerque is in the top 10 dangerous cities in the country. Well, El Paso is in the top 10 safest in the country. We're only a few hundred miles apart. I'm told that some special forces train their medics here in Albuquerque and Chicago because the number of shootings that occur. I shouldn't say shootings, but individuals injured due to gun violence. And it's not about you and I having a sidearm and shooting somebody. We're talking about violent criminals with weapons. So, tell you what are we going to do about it? It's not hard to do. Oh, I want to add one thing here. I know a med student that was at UNM Hospital doing a rotation in the emergency department. And she came, I talked to her that weekend, and she said 11 gun injuries came into the ER. She said it was like you saw in the movies, like in the MASH units, where you're going through individual at individual, and you're saying, this one's gone, meaning they're dead. This one is going to be gone. We only have the resources to handle these individuals. I'm thinking, they don't even call the priest anymore to give the last rites. Unconscionable. We can't even do that. So what are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? First, we're going to push for federal prosecution of felons in possession of firearms and possession of firearms while committing felonies. That's already started to happen, but it started under President Trump, and we need to continue that push. We need to revisit the bail bond system that we have. We need to keep criminals, violent criminals, behind bars until their trial. I was just sharing with Gerald, a gentleman a family that I know, their son, good family, their son went south, and he ended up stealing, I think, somewhere around 25 cars in 30 days, just cycled in and out. And then we need to hold our elected officials and appointed officials accountable for non-enforcement of the laws, and we need to hold our elected officials accountable for not enacting laws to keep violent criminals off our streets. We have people coming from across the country coming into Mexico because they know you and I are vulnerable. And we need to make it clear it's not going to work anymore. I'm Mick Rich, and this is To the Point. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you.
Middle of the field in some room, a move at the 20 and all the way. Touchdown.
Cleveland tonight sputtered at times, but when they got it going, just like right there. To the 5, touchdown Cleveland. Down and 10 here. Play action, looking, throws it out deep, has a man out there, ball is caught. To the 10, to the house, and just like that, the Cleveland Storm answer.
Away. Johnson, and now it's sent back post, and that is dangerous. It's by everyone, and then it's headed in. And so a misclearance.
They're going to give it. There goes Thompson trying to turn the corner and does. Thompson at the 15, 10, 5. Waiting for the call. Touchdown, Mayfield Trojans. Robertson will push it to Hobart on the far side. Tipped over the double block. Pancaked off the floor beautifully by Gonzalez Sanchez, and we're still going. Here's Hobart. She'll go over the double block. Lucero. Jones will send it to upset. Lucero has to get it over. Robertson. She'll push it over the block. Save. The left-handed save there by Lucero. Here's Jones. She'll have a swing. Yes! McIntosh. Excuse me, at the front.
Stepping up in the pocket and moving, and now to the 5 and diving towards the end zone and in.
Oh man, this beat is crazy.
Hobart. Jones. She'll set Mack for the championship. Yes! 5 in a row. La Cueva is the city's best yet again.
Cheers from La Cueva High School.
A little bit of the maybe not getting the reps he needed at quarterback. He's a wide open guy.
There's a big move by Rodriguez. Look out as he's down the sideline. A
Trouble.
cut, shot out of a cannon. Ivan Rodriguez, he's got all the speed. Can he break away inside the 10 to
And
the
he's gonna
5
make it.
and in? Touchdown.
Welcome back to The Point with Mick Rich. I'm here with my good buddy, Gerald Madrid. Gerald is owner, president of Gerald Madrid Bail Bonds.
Correct.
And you're also president of the New Mexico Bail Bond Association.
That's correct, and until we don't have any members anymore, so the association has kind of been disbanded because there aren't any more bail bond agents, so we don't have any members.
Okay, is there still an organization across the country?
There are a couple of national organizations, which I'm a member of one of them.
Okay.
And actually, we're slated to meet next month for one of our annual meetings. We'll be meeting in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay. So one of the things when I called you up yesterday and we chatted, I said, Gerald, I think you and I sat down and chatted at one of the dinners for the soccer teams. And I remember that your son, Christian, who's also your partner, and my son, Jim, played soccer together at Pius.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So, Gerald, I asked you to come on the program for a couple different reasons. Number one is that when I reached out to APD, the Police Officers Association, Bernalillo District Attorney Office, reached out to the New Mexico Attorney General. Nobody wants to come on the program, take the seat. So I appreciate, then all of a sudden it dawned on me, give Gerald Madrid a call. I appreciate you coming on board. And you heard the monologue, and I want to talk to you about this, is that right now, individuals are getting arrested for violent crimes, and they're getting released back into the streets. The judges are saying it's not my fault, it's the DA's office. DA's saying, well, we didn't get the info from the APD. Everybody's pointing the finger at everybody else. I wanted to get your take on it. And we passed this measure. So the first item was, who pushed this measure to change this law?
Bail reform started in New Mexico back in probably 2014, 15, and it was being spearheaded by the late retired Supreme Court Justice Charles Daniels. Now, he passed away last year, but he's the one that brought bail reform to New Mexico. He had Mr. Artie Pepin of the Administrative Office of the Courts, that's also an attorney, that those two went around the state and the country making speeches and giving presentations on the evils of the private bail bond system, and that was the cause of the crime problem in New Mexico. The other groups pushing this was Senator Peter Worth of the New Mexico legislature. He pushed it very hard. He's also an attorney. The ACLU and the Public Defender's Office. They were all in lockstep, going around, making speeches, testifying before the legislature on how the bail bond business was causing the revolving door at the jail and causing the crime problem in the state of New Mexico. So essentially the government blamed it on the private sector is what they did. And it sounded great.
I hear you. Isn't that just typical what you see?
The government sets up a program. When it doesn't work, they blame the private sector. And then the government comes in to solve the problem that they caused. And this is how it worked. But this whole idea started back in 2014-15. Mostly started under the Obama administration, being pushed by his Attorney General, Eric Holder, and of course, George Soros. Soros was involved in going around the country and spreading this new gospel of bail reform.
Right.
And that the bail bond system that is in use in the state and has been in the country for hundreds of years is unfair, and it's there needs to be some fairness and equity in it. It's unfair, and that the poor people are being punished. This idea that the poor people are in jail because the bail bondsman is at fault.
Right.
That the bail bondsmen are leaving the poor people in jail.
Oh, God. Okay.
That's where this whole thing came from. It's the bail bondsmen that are doing this. Now, the bail bondsmen don't set the bonds. The judge sets the bond.
Right. But also, if I get at the same point is that if you believe that individual is a flight risk, is number one, where you're going to be stuck with it, or if they go back out and commit additional crimes, did that come back and come on your plate?
before bail reform started, a judge would set bail on a defendant, normally in custody, accused of a crime, based on his criminal history, the likelihood of flight, the likelihood of reoffending, his ability to pay. Those were the main factors, not necessarily in that order, but those were the things that a judge would look at after hearing a background report on each defendant.
Right.
The judge would get a report read to him in open court.
Okay. Now, let's say, for instance, they can't, no matter who it is, if they have the money, you'll write the bond? Or did you say, I'm not writing a bond for that? Like, for instance, would you have written the bond for this accused murder of Jackson Weller?
Well, it all depends. You know, I look at everything when I have a client come into the office. I look at the crime. I look at his criminal history, his likelihood of flight, his ties to the community, the chances that he's going to reoffend. I look at everything. It's not just, do you have money to put on the table? There's a lot more to that. And the reason is because if that offender gets out of jail on my bond and absconds, now the court comes after me.
Right.
Personally, it comes after me for whatever amount that bond is.
Right.
And I have suffered financial losses on people that have absconded on me on large bonds. I know what that feels like. And I don't mean 10 or 50 or $100.
No,
I mean a lot of money
Gerald,
that I paid out.
I'm a contractor. We provide performance and payment bonds, and the insurance company is there to provide a bond to make sure that I'm going to follow through on my word. So I understand what you're saying. So that's the changes that were made. And we talk about what we have now is these violent offenders right back out on the street. And it's happening over and over. You see the violent crime rates going through the roof. So what do we do? What can we do today? What should be done?
Bail reform needs to go back, needs to leave the state. Because bail reform, what it does, it opens up the floodgates and it encourages and almost requires and demands judges to immediately, within a day or so, release the offender right back out of jail on nothing but a promise to appear. It's essentially an IOU that they're signing.
Right.
These offenders, one of my sayings is in jail today and out tomorrow at the latest. One of my other sayings is in New Mexico, from shoplifting to murder qualifies for a free and unsecured release from jail. It's all free. There's nothing backing the IOU that the offenders are giving the court. It's all, well, his word's good enough. Yeah. You know, he's accused of a violent crime and he has very extensive criminal history, but his word is all we need. So based on an offender or a defendant giving his word to the judge that he'll comply with conditions of release and he'll show up, that's all that's required in New Mexico. And it's called bail reform, that his word is good enough. And his word is not good enough, frankly.
Well, I tell you what, when I look at this individual that shot and killed Jackson Weller, I mean, number one, it was clear to me he had shot and killed somebody before. I looked, when I saw that tape, it sent chills up my spine to realize that there was somebody that didn't care an iota for a life. The fact is that when I saw that video and I realized this guy it wasn't the first time that he's been doing this multiple times. So would you go right back to what the old system was, or would you make changes to the old system?
I think a little bit of both. I would definitely go back to a bail system, a cash bail system. And anytime I say that, people say, see, you're just a greedy bondsman. You just want everybody on bond with you. You're greedy. And I've been accused of all kinds of fear-mongering by the public defender, being greedy, just wanting everybody on bond. I've been accused of it all. You know, a racist, wanting to take advantage of the poor people. I've already heard all that stuff.
I can imagine.
I've already heard all that stuff. Anyways, it needs to be a combination, but bail reform and getting out of jail and just a promise to appear is not enough.
No, and I agree with that.
And that's the first thing that needs to go is ideas of bail reform. In the old system, on the example you give on Basher, what would have happened before bail reform? He would have been arrested. He would have been taken before a judge within a day or so, made his first appearance, and the crime would have been looked at, probably first and foremost. His criminal history would have been looked at. The likelihood of reoffending would have been looked at. would have probably been the first of things, and the judge would have done one of two things in the old system. The judge would have detained him without bond, or the judge would have set a substantial bond, cash bond on him that he would have to post to get out. That's what the judge would have done in the old system.
Out of curiosity, so let's say the first one, he shot somebody in the stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, and I read that in the Albuquerque Journal. He shot somebody in the stomach, which is a horrendous injury. That's what you hear. A gut shot is just brutal. So what would have been the bail scenario for that, for the first one?
You know, back before bail reform, it could have been $50,000 to $100,000 bail that a local judge would have set.
And he would have had to post
10% of that. Yeah, 10% of that.
Okay.
With the bond agency like mine.
Okay, so that's number one. So let's say he does post the 10%, and now he's back on. Now has the second crime in January, February of 19, and he's caught, arrested for shooting from a vehicle. He's before a judge. What type of bond would you?
On the second one?
Second one.
The judge would probably hold him without bond, because the first bond that he got out on had what's called conditions of release with him, which I call the do's and don'ts. The judge says no drugs, no alcohol, no firearms or dangerous weapons, don't contact any victims or witnesses, don't violate any laws. Those are conditions on the first crime. And if an offender goes out and commits another violent crime or anything, he's now violated conditions of release on the first go-around. And so the second time he's back in jail, the judge then would have the grounds to hold him without bond, and or even set even a higher bond.
Right. Okay.
You know, and the bond, it does cost money, but it's gonna keep him in jail, and it's gonna slow him down. If he's really on a mission to get out there and do some serious damage, the bond is going to keep him in jail where he can't do that anymore.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me, had we not had bail reform, Jackson Weller would be alive today. UNM made a big deal of providing his parents with a diploma from UNM as if it would made up for the loss of their son. Jackson Weller would be alive today if it wasn't for bail bond reform.
That's correct, yes. On the first time he offended, he would probably had a high bond set and would have remained in jail unless he could post that high bond.
Okay.
And that would have possibly prevented, the second offense where somebody was killed.
Gerald, thank you very much. I appreciate that. We're going to talk about national issues moving forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Nice, Dad.
So back to pass now as Harris steps back and fires, and he's going deep across the middle, and it's caught. Malik Phillips dancing away.
In the first half, he's been under pressure all game anyway. Smith back to pass. They're trying to set up the screen to Barker, and they've got blockers in front. Barker cuts it back. Barker in the open field, 40, 45, 50. Barker's got one man to beat. Barker may go to the house, and he will. Caden Barker Jordan Barker touchdown, Carlsbad.
But here we go. Let's see how he does.
Cabrales will kick off from the 40 and
Drives it hard.
And here they try to see that reverse again.
And he fakes it.
Oh, he's got it. He's got one man to beat and a blocker in front. 35, 40, 50, 45, he's gone. There's no Hornet that will catch him. Opening kickoff return for Slade Campos, 80 yards. And
ball falls for Nava, puts it forward for Moyers. Moyers gets it past the keeper, and it's 2-1.
Denard all by himself. They're looking for him. They throw it in the end zone. Underthrown and caught. How about that? Mercy. Trevon Denard. Wow.
It's his night.
It's his night.
What's up? Uses that foot. No, this time she goes low. And there's a scrum there. The ball's loose. And it's up and it's in. How about that? Going top shelf.
Good dump and then a good wherewithal to keep it up. There's Jones on a good dig. Martinez. Huggins was blocked into a middle. Kept alive and then dumped back over. Let's keep playing, girls. Cross court this time from Cooperno. Jones sets to the outside. McIntosh was blocked. That's knocked back over. We'll continue the rally. Cooper on the right hand. Back row and McIntosh, a little miscommunication with Lucero. Let's see if that fires up these Cougars. Harris has some time. And a rollout looking. Harris fires on the move and it's complete. Slipping one. It's Webskowski and another, and it's a foot race. Shot out of a cannon. Justin Webskowski. Can he take it all the way? Touchdown.
The Jaguars. There's Smith again, cuts it back. Nice run by Smith, still on his feet, going to the end zone. Touchdown.
Harris with the fake pitch, and now a run to the outside, and he's got some room. Nice move, Harris, look out. He's across the 40, a cut to midfield. He's got a blocker in front, look out. Chance Harris, shot out of a cannon, and he's gonna take it all the way. Touchdown.
Welcome back to The Point with Mick Rich. I've got my good buddy here, Gerald Madrid of Gerald Madrid Bail Bonds. Gerald, we talked before about the bail bond reform, or it's just a catastrophe, what that has been for our city and our state. But we're not alone. New Mexico isn't alone in this. The same issues that swept our state, swept the country. We're seeing violent crimes going through the roof. People looking at the shootings in Chicago, in Baltimore, in Washington. We're not alone. Gerald, you're a part of the National Association of Bail Bondsmen.
Correct.
What are you hearing with your fellow members?
This idea of bail reform started in the state of New Jersey. From New Jersey, it came to New Mexico. It was passed by the voters of New Mexico in 2016 and became law on July 1st of 2017. That's the official beginning of bail reform here. After New Mexico, it went back to the state of New York. And you've probably seen things on the news and online about the crime problem in New York.
Right.
The state of New York has bail reform, which means there is no cash bail. It's in today and out tomorrow at the latest, on nothing but a promise to show up, or what they call appearance tickets.
Right.
The jail will write the guy a ticket and say, here's your court date, and he walks out. It has destroyed not just the state of Mexico, but it's destroyed the state of New York. You can see the crime issue going on there. People being killed on the subways, all the rioting and looting going on over the summer. If people were arrested, they were right back out of jail probably the same day, and nothing but a promise to appear. This problem is not unique to New Mexico. It's kind of spreading across the country, this idea of bail reform, and that it's not fair, and that cash bail discriminates against people of color and people with low income or moderate income. It keeps them in jail is the argument. So therefore, cash bail is immoral and unethical and should be done away with. There should be no cash involved in the bail system, is the argument.
What I find interesting is that the people that are getting in, that are breaking the law, the violent criminals, they are, by and large, when they're arrested, they go before a judge, they're back out on the street. They're back into those minorities, if indeed they're minorities, they're back in their communities. And the victims are minorities.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is the horrendous part about the bail bond reform, is that the victims, the homicide victims, are minorities. Mm-hmm. And you see it over and over, the number of minorities being shot and killed is horrendous. And it's like, oh, well, but at least they're back out on the street. They're being treated fairly, but the victims, they're not seeing fair and equitable or fair and equal justice under the law.
These offenders that are in jail today and out tomorrow are going right back to where they came from in most cases.
Yeah.
Wherever they were committing crimes, they're going to go right back to there because they got out so easily. And with no involvement of their own, they're not vested in the process. It's simply a promise to appear. And when the judge releases them from jail the next day, the judge will assign a public defender to represent them, of course, at the taxpayer's expense, and then we'll tell the offender, and I want you to report to pretrial services. Like that is the end all. Like pretrial services really got this all figured out. And all the pretrial services are, it's just another bureaucracy, kind of like probation officers that work 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and are in theory supervising all these offenders. Probably half of the people assigned to pretrial services never show up there, or show up and don't come back.
I was chatting with a gentleman here. I gave him, he was going to go to rehab. He needed a ride down to the train station. I did that. Then, I bought him lunch, and because he didn't have any money.
Yeah.
And so we're talking. I said, so what brought you to New Mexico? He said, well, 3 strikes and you're out in California. He said, I could be here, and I've got free reign.
Oh, yeah.
And we're seeing that. So Gerald, what state has taken this on and gone back and said, we're going to go back to the bail bonds system? Has any state done that so far?
They have not. New Jersey is still under bail reform. They've never gone back. And the first thing that bail reform does, it puts all the bail bond agents out of business. That's what it does, the first thing that happens. And so New Jersey started before New Mexico, and we started here in July of 17. And New Jersey did that probably the previous year. But nobody has reverted back to the old way, to the cash bail system. Once they get in, and the longer it stays in, the more entrenched it gets. And it just gets into every aspect of our judicial system, is this idea of bail reform, and that we don't need you anymore, just go on home. That's what they told us. We don't need you guys, just go on home. We got it all figured out. We're going to give them a promise to appear ticket. We're going to give them a public defender, and we're going to have pretrial services supervising them. Well, it sounds good, but when it comes time for the offender to show up in court and he doesn't, that's where there's a breakdown. Now who's going to go get him? Nobody. The police can't go out and get him. They're too busy trying to keep up with today's crimes. There's not a warrants squad anymore the way there used to be that was going out serving arrest warrants. That doesn't happen anymore. So when the offenders just fail to appear and or fail to go report into pretrial like everybody's on pretrial, that's the end of the story. The judge will issue a warrant for the offender, but okay, well, what's the second half here? There's nobody looking for him. In my world, when my client fails to appear, I get notified from the court in writing, your client didn't show up. Now it's my problem to go find him. My expense and my risk to go find him, arrest him, and bring him back into the system. And that's what worked, because it was all on my dime.
Right. Okay, so I hear loud and clear what you're saying, telling our viewers. So item 1, to turn this around. And you and I are going to sort this out. We're going to do it in about 3 minutes, 4 minutes. The first item we're going to do, and I thought about it. I went back and I looked at the judge that released Basher.
Yeah,
Basher.
Yeah.
Released him, and he said, well, this, and this. And I said, first of all, we need to start a database of what judges let the violent criminals back out on the street. And when it comes time for re-election, not the attorneys putting out a report card, and not the judges putting out a report card, and not the district attorney putting out a report card, but the hardworking people in New Mexico put out a report card and say, this individual, his actions resulted in the death of Jackson Weller. And we start to hold the judges accountable. That's one I see. Does that sound reasonable to you?
It does, but ironically, in this last election, all but 2 of the judges were retained.
Oh, I agree with that.
All but 2 of them were retained. And see, and that's the process we have in here. The first time a judge comes in office, they have to, the first election, they got to run for it. After that, it's just retention.
Right.
They just retention. And I think, and many of the voters that are not involved in the criminal justice systems don't know the judges by name or really don't know what they do.
That's why I say we're going to put together, I talked about putting together an independent group to track how our state is doing nationally ranked. And we need to do this, dial it down to the crime level. And we're going to sit there and we're going to take a look at these judges. And we're going to, independent, put out a report card so that people say, this judge and his actions resulted in these individuals being killed. And we put it that close and just point blank. I wish before I came on the program today what the judge's name was. Because I would.
Basher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two is we're going to look. So then the judge is saying the district attorney let us down.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell you what, now we're going to do a report card on the district attorney. And we're going to go after the district attorney because they're not doing their job.
They're not prepared. I know that. I've talked to private attorneys, and he tells me how ill-prepared many of the ADAs are.
Yeah.
The assistant district attorney. They're not prepared. There's no passion. There's no desire to fight. The public defender is all charged up and ready to go when they get in the courtroom with the DA.
Why? Because they win.
Well, yeah. I mean,
the public defenders are winning. Nothing, you know as well as I do, nothing worse than being on a losing team. You get to the point, you go, I'm suiting up, but what's the point of walking on the field? We're going to get our butt kicked.
A year or so ago, before the courts were shut down, I was sitting in one of the courtrooms watching what's called felony first appearances. And that's where offenders were arrested on a felony today. They stay in jail overnight and see the judge tomorrow. And I was sitting behind the ADA that was there in the courtroom that day. The ADA is at one table, the public defender's at the other, and the judge is on the bench. The ADA was sitting there playing on his cell phone as this is going on. I'm watching him right behind him, and about the only thing he had to say after the public defender suggested that the offender got released OR, the state concurs. That's all he had to say. The state concurs, Your Honor. Like, come on, you don't have any fight in you at all? This guy has an extensive criminal history.
I think they
and
got
the state concurs?
I think that we take a look at that, look at the record, we hold them accountable. And we put together an independent group to do a report card, to create a report card on how the judges are doing, how the district attorney is doing, how the assistant DA is doing, and we do that. I think the next thing we do, Gerald, if we start to do that, and I'm an optimist. You know, my wife says that, right? Mm-hmm. You're an optimist. I've been in business for almost 40 years. If I wasn't an optimist, I wouldn't be in business. You have to be an optimist to be a bail bondman. Why? Because you're dealing with people that have broken the law, and you're counting on them to follow through. The third item we're going to do is we're going to do a report card on the police department. Are they getting the information to the assistant DA? And we're going to do all of those things. And if you're tuning in, I need your help. We are going to go out there. We're going to go out and we're going to start to raise the funds so we can hire the people to build these and perform these report cards. Because this is the only way we're going to turn our state around. Because the elected officials are in lockstep and they're putting violent criminals back out on our streets. Every time my daughter leaves the house to head out in the evenings, I worry about her getting to where she's going safely. And I know I'm not the only one. And it's got to come to an end, and we're going to do it together. I'm Mick Rich, and this is To the Point.
Don't sacrifice quality of flavor when you're in a hurry. Golden Pride offers ribs, fried chicken, green and red chili breakfast burritos, and Frontier Cinnabons. 4 great locations, or visit us online at goldenpride@abq.com. Golden Pride Barbecue Chicken and Ribs, proud supporter of ProView Sports Network.
Well, I'm going to the frontier, walk up to the cashier, order up a root beer and a number one. Cover it with green stuff, one scoop is not enough. Find a booth is real tough, back by the Duke. Meet my family, meet my friends in the quirkiest restaurant I have ever been. All of Albuquerque's favorite spot, it's the Frontier Restaurant.
The Frontier Restaurant is a proud supporter of ProView Sports Network.
Welcome back to The Point with Mick Rich. I'm here with my good buddy, Gerald Madrid of Gerald Madrid Bail Bonds. And also, you're a member of the New Mexico Bail Bond Association. Does it still exist?
It does on paper.
Okay.
We just don't have any members.
Okay.
Everybody's out of business.
Understand. So, Gerald, we talked about the program about crime, and that is one of the issues that front and center when we talk about how New Mexico is doing, talk about crime. But really, when we talk about the issues, how do we get our state off the bottom? It's about crime, public safety, tax revenues, tax exemptions, government spending, infrastructure, environment, as well as citizens' physical and financial health. So, Gerald, what are your thoughts on how do we get our state from the bottom 10 to the top 10? What's the first three things we can do?
People living here have to feel safe. And the way they're going to feel safe is by getting the crime problem under control, which it is not, obviously, right now. It's out of control. We hear about that every day in the media, whether it's the Albuquerque Journal, it's online, it's another publication talking about how unsafe it is in New Mexico. I take phone calls from all over the country from prospective clients or people that just have questions, and they're asking me things about New Mexico. And they've read things in their home state about New Mexico, and it's seldom good things. It's things that are bad here, and they ask me about them. But I believe the first thing that this state needs to do is get the crime problem under control. The reason why it's not under control, there's several reasons. Number one, bail reform. Bail reform opens the floodgates for all other problems that are going on. And so long as we don't have accountability in our system, judges are not being held accountable. Offenders, most importantly, are not being held accountable. The offenders know that there are few to no consequences for committing crime or reoffending in this state. There's nothing, it requires nothing of them to get themselves back out of jail if they get arrested here, if they get arrested.
So we're talking about accountability of the criminals, accountability of the judges, accountability of the district attorney's office, in the police department. Those four segments.
That's correct.
And that's what we got to do. And then lastly, to tie in with that is making our legislators accountable to enact laws so we get the violent criminals off our streets.
Right. And I've often said this is not difficult. This is not hard to figure out what the problem is and what the solution is. It's not. It really isn't. And I just think back to my years growing up at home, a family of 9. My dad was in the military, and there was 9 of us. You know, I'm talking 60s and 70s growing up.
Yeah.
There were severe consequences for stepping out of line. Severe.
Yeah.
And we didn't do it again. And I relate that to kind of today where there are no consequences. Now today the offenders are told they're victims.
Yeah.
Somehow they're giving the world, it's not your fault. You know, the system is skewed. There's all kinds of racism, prejudice going on here. This is not your fault. So we don't want to think that this is your fault. There's nothing required. So the biggest thing, as you mentioned, is accountability, and it starts with the judges. Now the judges are going to say it's not us.
Right.
We're just following the law. That's all we're doing. Don't blame us. But the judges have discretion. They have discretion to release somebody on nothing but a promise to appear, all the way to a secured bond, which is what I do. Right. There's a lot of discretion there, but the judges virtually almost always just use what's called a release on recognizance.
So, and I
That's
think
all they use.
And I think the reason that they do that is they'll get penalized and reprimanded. utilizing the bond, not, and if they let them back out on the street, we got to make it so there's consequences if the criminals that they let back out on the street create havoc, catastrophe. So so that's front and center, number one.
Accountability in the system, which there is none anymore.
So what's number two?
After crime, I think the state government needs to loosen up on the rest of us, open the state up, and let people get out there and do what they need to do. We all know what we need to do as parents, grandparents, employers, members of society. We know what we need to do, but we can't operate with all these restrictions on us.
You talking about COVID, or you talking about other restrictions?
Well, probably mostly that.
Right now,
You know,
that's a killer.
And the government telling us, for example, New Mexico being described as a poor state. Well, how did we get that label? Why are we poor? Or the government deciding that everybody is poor. Poor in what? Poor in resources? Poor in cash? Poor in relationships? What are we poor in? And the government is deciding who gets what and when. I don't like that, and it doesn't work. Just like in the bail system, the government has decided that everybody's poor, therefore everybody needs a free pass out of jail and a public defender, because everyone's poor. And they've just given us that label and decided in advance that's what we need. The government doesn't need to tell us what we need. We can figure out for ourselves what we need, and we know how to go handle our business. That's number two.
Okay, I tell you what, I'm good with that. This was a number of years ago. I needed a CDL driver to drive our dump truck, operator backhoe. A company that I knew was going out of business. Russ Pitney, he was retiring. And I called him up. I said, hey, Russ, I'm looking for a backhoe operator, truck driver. Do you have somebody? He said, yeah, here's the guy's name. I called him up. He came over. We paid good money. Twice the prevailing wage, if not more than that. Sick leave, medical leave, family leave, vacation, health coverage. And he worked for us for a week and said, I'd rather just stay at home and get unemployment and be with my kids. And he quit. And I'm saying, this is what you're talking about is there's opportunities out there for people. There's companies looking for people. We need to make it an incentive for people to go to work, not an incentive to stay home. So
that's exactly what
I agree with
talking
that.
about,
So what's the third one?
Oh gosh, I don't have a third one.
Okay, your kids. You have what? 3 sons?
Yeah, I do.
Any daughters?
No.
3 sons. Okay. Your 3 sons went to St. Pius.
That's correct.
Why didn't they go to Albuquerque Public Schools?
Well, we decided early on that we wanted them to go to private school. And they started in kindergarten at a private Catholic school, and then from there transitioned right into St. Pius. That's just what we decided back then, and it worked. I've asked my kids, do you regret any of that? They said, no, we wouldn't have changed anything. They made the lifelong friends, and it instilled in them the customs and traditions that we wanted them to have.
It's not just the Catholic traditions, not just the Catholic belief, but the idea is that that Catholic school held them accountable for their behavior.
That's correct.
It held them to a standard for academic achievement. It gave them outside activities that you didn't necessarily, a lot of those you don't see in public school. Right? You paid good money. I know that because I had 3 kids go to Pius, and you pay good money to send your kids to St. Pius. You could have bought another car, you could have bought a nicer car.
Paid off the house, whatever.
Paid off, right.
Yeah.
But you made us, and it's not a matter that you're rolling in money, but the idea is that you looked at it and said, Albuquerque is failing in achieving the values that we believe that are important. And I'm seeing this, and if people can, they are bailing from Albuquerque Public Schools. Look at this. Catholic schools are in class, right?
Oh,
in
yeah.
session.
I have a granddaughter going to Catholic school.
Right.
They're going to
And
school, in-person schooling.
in-person schooling, and APD isn't. I mean, Albuquerque Public Schools are not.
What's the difference?
What's the difference? That's right.
I mean, why can they and they can't? This school can and this school can't. Why not?
And our school system is at the bottom.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about we're at the top for violent crimes and the stats and all of those, but our school system is at the bottom, and it's a disaster. And I'm saying, what do we do? How do we? What do you think of the idea of allowing parents to say, Albuquerque Public Schools, they're not having an in-person school. We're going to allow you to take your tax dollars and go take them somewhere else to go get your child educated.
Kind of a voucher.
A voucher
Take
system.
a voucher and go to a private school. Of
Go
course,
any Catholic school, Protestant school,
whatever you want. The parent wants.
Hope, Albuquerque Academy, or Sandia Prep, or down to Manal School.
Yeah.
I mean, those schools are doing very, very well financially. In APD, in Albuquerque Public Schools, is losing student population. Our education system's a disaster. And what is the legislature doing? What's our governor doing? They're saying, we've done such a great job with K through 12, and I'm being satirical about this, that now we want to take our successes, or really our complete failures in K through 12, and take them to pre-K. This to me is, what do you think?
You know what bothers me? I hear a lot of times, all this money going into early education, with the little kids, 5 years, 6
Right.
years old, whatever. My question is, where's the parents at? The schools can't teach the kids everything. I mean, when we first got married, my wife stayed home. I worked. She stayed home. So we didn't have all the fancy things that the people down the street had, because all my money was going into private tuition.
Yeah,
you know, like
yeah.
you.
Yeah, right, that's right.
And my question is all the time is, where are the parents? Why aren't the parents teaching these kids some things at home, teaching their colors and their numbers and those basic things? Why are the parents demanding that the schools do everything? The schools can't do everything. The teachers can't do everything. But where are the parents? And that's my question.
Gerald, I agree with you. Teachers can't do everything. It comes back to holding the schools accountable for their failures and not letting them off the hook. Gerald, it's great having you here. It's good seeing you again. I know you don't remember our conversation, but I do. I remember sitting in the kitchen at that one house at the soccer dinner and chatting with you about the bail bonds industry. It was interesting. Thank you very much for coming today.
I appreciate it very much. My dad used to say this is the best secret there is about the bail bond business. We're a secret. Nobody knows about us.
Right.
You know, because we're not considered, but we're changing that.
Good. And this is Mick Rich, to the point. Thank you for tuning in today.